Okay, we are going to go through the steps to create a human head using our topology reference. We have a topology workbook that we're referencing or using called Pushing Points, or at least that's the name of it listed here. William Vaughan is the author, but we're going to be looking at the creation using primitives for the human head. I'm going to go ahead and create, shift right click here and create a cube. Drag on the base, and then I'm actually going to course correct over here using my channel box layer editor. Go ahead and turn on my cursor highlight there. I'm going to go to channel box layer editor with this object, and I'm going to zero it out, meaning I'm going to go ahead and put it at 0, 0, 0, and then a scaling is set there. And then I'm going to go over here to attribute editor, go to polycube, and the width, height, and depth are kind of all over the place, so I'm just going to go 10, 10, and 10. And that gives me a nice perfect cube. The next step is to, we're going to use a subdivision of the surface, or subdivide the mesh. They refer to the Catmull-Clark subdivision surface in the text, right? It's a refined algorithm that creates a smooth surface from a coarse polygon mesh. Anyway, the bottom line is shift right click, and we go down here to smooth. And you'll see that there's one division, and that's exactly what we want to have. Periodically, and I'm going to go ahead and start with it now, you're going to be looking at channel box layer. You'll notice that we've got inputs listed here under channel box. This is the history, construction history of whatever it is we're working on, which of course is this. Periodically, we're going to come over here and delete history, and under the poly modeling shelf over here, there's 3 buttons kind of right in the middle, conveniently for your viewing pleasure, and this middle one is delete by type history, delete construction history. There is also a way to do this over here, delete by type history, and it's also Alt-Shift-D. So we'll just do that, Alt-Shift-D, and then that gets rid of history. What that does over there is it builds up over time, and eventually it starts to eat up memory. Now, sometimes you want to keep it. There's types of history, like rigging, that you actually want to retain, but we're not going to get into that today. So there's that. Another thing that we'll be doing frequently is we're going to go through a smooth preview by tapping the 1, 2, and 3 respectively. 1 is the true geometry, 2 is smooth preview with the true geometry lattice, and then 3 is what it would look like if it were smooth, roughly speaking. It isn't exact, it's an approximation. But anyway, okay? So we're going to go through this step by step. You'll notice that the front is facing that direction, and I'm just going to spin this back around. I don't use the view cube very often, but it can sometimes be useful, you know, to work with. So if it's a preference for you, great, but I tend to not use it all that much. I'm going to spin up underneath what would be the chin of the head. This is going to be the front of the face, and this will be the chin. And you can either use key commands like F9, 10, and 11. And you'll notice that I've got this sort of yellow lines appearing around mine. You may not have that, but what that is soft selection, and we're not going to use soft selection right now. So you want to make sure that that's turned off. Tap B a couple times, and you'll see soft select mode is on. Tap B to turn it off. This is off. So the next thing we're going to do is extrude, and there's a bunch of different ways to do this. The way that I prefer to do it is I'm going to go to the Move tool, right? You can see W there will get us to the Move tool. And since we have the faces selected, and I also have Object X turned on in terms of my symmetry, which means, you know, as I select faces, it will select the symmetrical opposite, or the one that's across the X-axis. But I'm just going to select these faces, and then if I hold down Shift, it will say Extrude. Now another way to do this would just be to hit Control E, and then there's multiple different ways you can do it through the interface, but I'm just going to go ahead and use Shift and pull down on the Y-axis here. And if you didn't know, RGB right, on the axis is X, Y, Z. Now I currently have Y selected. Whichever one you have selected turns yellow. But for example, R being red is X, G being green is Y, and blue right there is Z. So, and what I did was I held down Shift, and now I have this chin shape right here, and we're going to be looking at it. And so that's what you do. Look at it from the side. You could click on right here, but this isn't the orthographic view. This is still in perspective, you'll notice, right? So I might hit my space bar, and this takes me to the top, front, and right side view to kind of see what I have going on. If you have a screen that's big enough, this is a preferred way of looking at things sometimes because you're going to be able to see more of what's going on. But you can see that we've extended this chin down, and this is kind of how we're going to make tweaks as we go along. I've selected these two faces. Again, remember that I have symmetry on. A quick way to turn symmetry on or off is to hold down Control Shift and the right mouse button, right? Just like Shift right mouse button gives you these tools, Control Shift gives you the ability to turn symmetry on or off. So just a little tip there for you. And that's the side view, okay? Here, we're going to go from here, and I'm going to be working a lot in perspective unless I need to visualize something. And I'm going to look at this in smooth preview with the lattice because this is my preferred way of operating because I like to see the geometry I'm working with and then the eventual result. I'm going to go ahead and right click here and go to edge, or again you can hit F10, and then if you double click on an edge, if it has a complete edge loop with quads, it will select the edge all the way around. And then we're going to do something to create some extra geometry here and get rid of this taut center line. I'm going to shift right click and I'm going to go to bevel edge. Okay, if I go to bevel edge, you'll notice that my mitering is set to uniform. Typically it's set to auto, but we're going to use uniform on a regular basis. In this particular case, it doesn't matter because what we're going for is this poly loop here that goes all the way around the head. So I'm going to click here, hold down Shift, double click, and that will select the poly loop that way. Another way to do that would be to click here, hold down Shift, and it will select the poly loop that way. This is indicative of good edge flow, right? Or good polygon flow around the face, and we'll get more into what that's going to look like anatomically here in a minute. But this is the step 5 essentially is where we're at in the reference that we're using. The next thing we're going to do is add some additional geometry down here around the chin by cutting an edge loop. Okay, our loop slice tool. There's many different ways to do it. In Maya, we're just going to shift right click and go to multi-cut. The multi-cut tool will let you chop up all kinds of things, and there's many different ways to go about this, but I like to just hold down Control, which actually follows the loop around this way. Another way to approach this would be to go to the side view here and then hold down Shift and just slice through the object like this, and you'll notice that it sliced just that edge, which is not what we want. So I'm going to right click here and go to object mode, then go to multi-cut, and then I'm going to hold down Shift, slice through this way. But you'll notice that we didn't cut all of the geometry, right? So while that method is rather imperfect, so again, my preferred way to do this is to just go to edge here, shift right click, multi-cut, hold down Control, and this gives you edge loop wherever you are. We're going to cut this edge loop right here, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and check smooth preview to see if it's following along with my reference. Now you might notice that these edges here are a little bit wonky. And what we can do is we can actually move them up and down, or we can even scale them so that they're a little bit more flat and even. And let's go ahead and see how that turned out. That's a little better, and I'm going to go ahead and move them up. And again, I'm in the side view here, okay, but you can see what the end result, and I'm just hitting spacebar to toggle back and forth, which you're going to see me do on a pretty regular basis. Another thing that's interesting, and we'll cover this a couple other times in other different tutorials and whatnot, you have viewport configurations over here. You've got this one, you've got this one, you've got this one. My favorite is actually to do 3 panes split left or split right. I actually prefer split right, which is down here. And I prefer for this one to be the perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the space bar and go to the perspective view here. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go ahead and make this the front view right here. So I'll go to front and then the side view over here. So this is one way to go about it, okay? You can switch these back and forth, but when you get to a point where you like the viewport configuration, you can actually right click over here and say save current layout. And I'm just going to save it as my fave, which isn't very descriptive. And this is split right. Okay. And now when I right click over here, I can go, down to my fave split right, and it will open up that view. So we can kind of get a better idea of what we're working with, and you can see there's a more descriptive view here. So learned this from, or was suggested and learned it from a channel called Flip Normals on YouTube. They're great for these kinds of tutorials. So, all right, moving along. We're at about 11 minutes here, so we're going to wrap it up. And the next steps are pretty straightforward as well. What we're going to start to learn how to do is pay attention to different cues. Whenever you see 3 or 5 edges meeting together, this is called a pole right here. And just below this pole, I'm going to shift right click again, go to multi-cut, and cut a loop around the top of the head. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before over here in the side view. I could do it here as well. And I'm going to kind of straighten this out by scaling these edges. Okay, I double clicked on the edges to select the loop, and then I'm going to move it down this way, which gives us kind of some nice contour there. You could scale it out as well. The problem is when you scale it out without turning off symmetry, it can produce some irregular results. So you just want to be mindful of that. And then just below what we're eventually going to call sort of the eye line here, we're going to cut 2 more edge loops this way. 1 and 2, and give it the same treatment again. Double click, scale, kind of flatten it out. Double click, scale, and kind of flatten it out. And while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and do that here and try to create a smoother edge flow throughout the object so that we have something that looks a little bit like this in smooth preview. Again, you can see that I'm going through 1, 2, 3 to sort of see where we're headed with this. And just to wrap it up here, if we're in the side view, you can see we've got kind of a sharp move here. So I'm actually going to take either the edges or vertices and kind of scoot them out from the side view, and you'll be able to see the result over here. But I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to rotate them a little bit and kind of smooth it out. So moving and rotating and scaling until we get a much better sort of contour edge flow. We don't want a lot of jagged edges. That just essentially represents bad edge flow. But you can see now that that's smoothed that out a little bit. Don't be afraid to kind of go a little too far and then bring it back in. It's always good to test the limits a little bit with this stuff. And that's it for the beginning of the head. Next round, we'll get started moving through some other steps.